You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Wellborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. Joining him is everyone's favorite coach and hair model, Chris, aka Tex McQuilkin, Power Athlete's Director of Performance. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Power Athlete Nation, today we welcome Coach Jason Brown, developer of Conjugate and Conditioning. Conjugate times conditioning. Online X-conditioning. Online trainer since 2015 and author of the book Lower Body Training, the definitive guide to increasing size, strength, and athletic performance. Jason, welcome to Power Athlete Radio.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate being on today. This is awesome.
Yeah, man, it's like we're traveling similar paths in the world of not only the sport of fitness enthusiasts, but also the world of online training. So you picked up in 2015, man. That's where I want to start this conversation. Like, what led you to this moment, which I feel I need to get my training out there, or something's going on in the gym business that I personally need to adjust my career?
Yeah, so it's funny. I got into it kind of just organically by working with one CrossFit gym for their programming. So it was, there wasn't a whole lot going on back then, but CrossFit gyms needing to outsource their programming was a real thing. I had no idea what would come from that, but that was the catalyst for making the jump to online. Now, I was working with only a few gyms back in 2015. Actually, it was 2014, right around December. 2015, word of mouth started to spread with me working with other CrossFit gyms and basically delivering them their entire programming, from their warm up, their strength, their conditioning pieces, cool down, their coaches' notes. And really from there, it just spread organically. And I remember thinking, I got to a point where I was delivering programming through Google Sheets, which, I'm sure you guys have done that at one point or another, but it's a very, very haphazard way to be delivering programming, especially once your client base starts growing. And there wasn't Train Heroic and all the great stuff that we have now. So I remember having about 100 gyms on my programming and thinking, okay, this is probably the time that I should either focus on just this, or, maybe I'm going to, try to do both. I owned a gym at the time. So I made the decision that I was just going to leave the gym owner world behind, sell my business, and go 100% online and headlong into just doing online coaching. And that's really what happened. That's how it kind of started. And I didn't do like any marketing or anything like that. It was really just word of mouth and the CrossFit affiliate page. So my initial online business was box programming. So just writing programming for CrossFit boxes. And we grew to about 210 gyms. And it became a very, very serious business pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, we never used Google Sheets. So what we did is we set up a kind of a paid back end on WordPress. And then I would go in and I would launch blog posts with training programs, like the weekly training or daily training, whatever it was, on the paid gateway for WordPress. It was awful. Because then people are like leaving their results on like the comments, and it was really hard, especially when we grew to like 800, 900 people. Then you're like looking, there's like hundreds of comments, and you're trying to go through and sift and trying to put everything into a spreadsheet for the results to see if there was efficacy for the program. Because at the time we were testing EMS devices for Compex and PowerDot. We were using BFR, a bunch of the compensatory acceleration training, a bunch of the CAT that we were building came out of that programming, and it was just an absolute nightmare. So then we looked at actually developing our own app and sat with a couple developers, and it was just such a laborious process. And I kind of got into this, like, are we a tech company? Are we a training company? Let's just be a training company. And that's how we got to a relationship with Train Heroic. The coming on as Train Heroic's power user in the beginning, like asking like, hey, this is what we need, and really banging on the system to get it to what it's evolved to today has been a hell of a process. But it's in the beginning, man, it was like just like the Wild West. And for the most part, similar to you, our stuff just came because people asked for it. We were putting out a bunch of free stuff on CrossFit Football, and people wanted a more detailed training experience. They wanted a more detailed community. And the only way I knew how to do it and get the results was to actually put it up and make people pay for it. Because at the end of the day, as you know, people don't value free shit.
Right.
So to get somebody to actually value something, they have to pay for something, which is the strangest fucking thing, because we would have given it away, but we couldn't get people to give us the results. So I had to force them to pay to get the results, which still doesn't make a ton of sense. But that's how that really grew. So I feel you on the Google Sheets, but yeah, we looked at doing that and I'm like, there's no fucking way I can do this.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it was kind of one of those things where I thought it was going to be more of a hobby. We had a lot of gyms interested in our programming because I came from the Conjugate world, from strength and conditioning. And then I got involved with CrossFit just through the military. And, CrossFit kind of opened my eyes to the aerobic system. I just was, and I'm sure you guys can identify with this, where, aerobic training back in 2004, 2005 was, if you do this, you're going to get slower, weaker, and fatter. So we didn't do any aerobic training. It was, all related to strength conditioning. I played football in college, and that was really kind of the direction I went. Now, when I got involved with CrossFit, I realized there was this whole world, and I had, my aerobic system was basically dog shit at the time. I, couldn't do CrossFit open workouts. I was strong, but there was this huge missing piece of the puzzle for me. And that really opened my eyes up to the value of having an intact aerobic system and really going down, the energy systems rabbit hole. So, the conjugate side of things, we had people, we were box squatting, we were using accommodating resistance, we were doing a lot of GPP based work, a lot of sleds, pushes, pulls, carries. And, at the time, it just seemed like no one was doing that stuff. They were kind of deeming it as non-functional. And a lot of the gyms that I worked with had incredible success. People were hitting 100-pound PRs on their squats and like all the time. I mean, that was like a regular occurrence, and they just didn't understand how that was happening. So needless to say, I went from having 4 gyms on board to 100 within a year's time. And then another year, we had another 100 people on board, which, again, coming from being a gym owner, and, I think me and my wife collectively were making about $100K a year with a 200-member gym, to now having a $500,000 online business, $500,000 a year online business was like, what the fuck? What am I even wasting my time with owning a gym and busting my balls working, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, when I could just put all my effort into just one thing and, really have the ability to write my own ticket.
Well, you also have to have the lab, though. I mean, I did the same thing. I mean, I had a CrossFit Balboa, and we had a physical gym. I was traveling, teaching CrossFit football seminars. We started putting out programming. We were still doing Power Athlete. And what was cool was, and not that I would go back in a heartbeat, but I think that there was a lot of value in those early days, being able to have a whole bunch of people to test stuff on. Sure. And, and I think without that actual brick and mortar experience and a little bit of knowing what the gyms go through, I just don't think that you've created any ethos. So now all of a sudden you're like, I've been a gym owner. These are the results we're getting in our gym. And it's such an easier narrative, not that you're spinning a narrative, but like the narrative just makes sense to people and really kind of grew it. I think where people are struggling maybe today in the online deal is if you don't have that practical experience. Sure. And I know for us, I mean, we, here at where we are, I mean, we still have a gym. People come in, we're training athletes presently, and it's nice to bring people in and be able to work in like kind of small focused, hey, we have a specific task. This guy needs something specific, and let's work with this, high level athlete. Whereas, which is kind of interesting, because then you're in a situation where everything works. Opposed from, like, I always go back to the general pop thing where we had these amazing ideas and all these systems and everything, and you're like, fuck, dude, nothing is working on these people. And it's because, they're, never built a strength base. The lack of conditioning, like, Louis always talked about, you got to have a base level of GPP to be able to build upon, right. As you found. So, I mean, there was just a lot of things that I think I saw within the training lab, and I also know Chris working in CrossFit gyms and also working as a strength coach. There's just a lot of ideas that I don't know if we could speak from a position of authority if we didn't have that. But yet I would never go back to do it again. If somebody's like, you want to open a gym? I'd be like, fuck no. Like, as you found out, but it's kind of like, it's like the history of it. It just makes
definitely
sense.
Necessary. It's necessary. I mean, you have to be in the trenches. I don't think that, I get people all the time ask me, how do I gain clients? How do I gain online clients? And that's a tough one to answer. I think that, there's a lot of ways you can skin the cat. But I think having been there and done it and worked with people in person, if you're trying to be a trainer and you're a new trainer and you're going to shift right to online, that's a vital piece of the process that you're missing. Working with people, having your hands on them, being tactile, being able to, to see things real time versus working with people remotely. Some of the stuff you're not seeing, you don't see anything real time. So you're giving someone feedback, but then they don't get to take action on that feedback till, days later. It's very tough to try to explain that to someone that hasn't been there and done it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, just the amount of traffic and the people shooting us stuff, like being able to look at videos and go through and be able to do meaningful coaching, and then having them, the test and the retest, like, hey, this is going to pop up again, like, constantly varied. Like the days of constantly varied are kind of over. Like there's a set base of movement patterns that we need to constantly revisit to see if we can track progress, which I think in the CrossFit gym, like people were just randomly throwing workouts out there. Yeah. And I remember looking at Jim's programming and being like, well, how do you know people get better? Well, they're getting better. I'm like, yeah, but the workouts are different every day.
Yeah. A big part of our education, Jason, was programming. Like we'd teach 2 programming lectures, and then part of the homework on Saturday night, we'd send them home to essentially we gave them a strength template, and then please provide the conditioning. And we would just grade these things.
Oh, it was so bad. We got to the point where I think we just cut that from the course because
it was amazingly bad.
Yeah, and like my first question has always been like when somebody submitted programming, how long does this take? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, have you ever done this? No. And I'm like, you're like a cook that doesn't eat their own food.
Right.
I mean, and that was something we saw universal, that people were going in and they were programming without testing anything. I mean, there wasn't anything that we've ever programmed that we haven't done ahead of time. There were all these great ideas we had. We went and tested it, and we're like, I fucked myself up. Like heavy deadlifts and toes to bar. Like if you want to fuck somebody's sciatic up and get them not walking, do that one for one. So there was just a whole bunch of stuff. We're like, oh, this sounds like good. Well, let's go fuck it. Let's go give it a try. And there were a lot of bodies left on the floor when we're like, yeah, we can't program that. And people, that was the one thing that struck me. I mean, we were fortunate. I mean, there's hundreds of seminars, and we would give these programming things, and it was invariable that people would submit programs and no concept of how long it would take, what kind of, how this whole thing would go, how they're going to skin it, how they're going to put it in a class environment, how they were going to get 40 kids to run through it. And then on top of it, I've never done any of these fucking workouts because this shit looks awful and I would never do it. And I remember just like pulling my hair out and being like, you can't do it. Like, yeah. So I'm sure in the same right, like, you were in your gym, you saw what was working, you were training with your athletes, you're still doing all these things. And now you're like just offering, hey, this is what we're doing in our gym. Now let me help these other gyms.
Well, that you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly it. I had a bank of programming and it had all been tested. So the lesson plan, as far as knowing the actual minute of how long everything should take, and, being able to write a lesson plan, which, in and of itself is a whole other thing and a whole other side to programming, which I don't do anymore. I actually don't own that business. I actually sold that business and made another shift with what I was doing personally. But there are so many different moving parts to that. If you don't know precisely how long something should take, then there's going to be a disconnect, whether it be from just, the response of the training itself, or, even going deeper, like looking at how they're responding on a stress level to the programming that you're writing for them. So I don't know how you would write programming for a group setting and know how it's going to turn out if there is not some type of testing process that's done beforehand.
So with the conjugate stuff, I mean, you were exposed to that in the military through Westside Barbell?
Yeah. So prior to the military, I started training at a facility when I was a kid that was, my strength coach was involved with Westside. So I'd been to Westside back when I was a kid. This was probably 2004, 2005. And then I went again a few times, and I went again with Louis and Glenn Pendelay taught that seminar that they did. It was like a one-time seminar that the two of them did together. So that was the last time I've been to Westside, which I think now was like 2016. So yeah, I've been involved with a conjugate method, and did the special strengths course a while back now, 2014, 2015. I've read every book and anything Louis has ever said or done. I have consumed, over the years. from books like Super Training and Science of Practice Strength Training, go down the list of all the texts that there are for the special strengths exam. So, it's funny, when I started getting involved with CrossFit, I started, doing my own experimentation, like anyone, like you said, being in the trenches and experimenting, seeing what works. There was a lot of different things that I experimented with, a lot of different models of training, and even using at one point a lot of linear periodization. And, I always found that there was a disconnect between trying to marry both strength and conditioning within the same week. There would always be some type of interference, which we know can be the case if you are going too hard on any one of those areas. So every time I reintroduce Conjugate to my own training is when I started going down the right path again. So really through my own trial and error, I started, really making Conjugate kind of the base of that program. And then we could put things in like classic CrossFit couplets and triplets, and do it a little bit more strategically, where, again, like you said, deadlifts and toes to bar. It's a great example of a classic CrossFit couplet, but done under the wrong circumstances. I see a lot of gyms are doing a 5RM deadlift, and then they're doing 2159 of deadlifts and toes to bar. It's like, there is a point of diminishing returns. You've got hip extension, hip flexion happening on multiple scenarios with high levels of loading. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I would honestly kind of trick people into doing more of a Conjugate based session. So we might do, a submaximal effort deadlift, and it might be followed by loaded carries and sled pushes, right? They don't know the difference that, in the scheme of things, it might look very different, but it might feel the same to them. So it was really a lot about tricking people into doing more accessory work, more single joint exercises, more, just foundational pattern movement work, to build, as you say, their base of fitness. So then when we do things like the CrossFit Open, or, they do a CrossFit competition, they're in a good position to be successful with that stuff and still not be overtrained and losing motivation. Because I see a lot of the gyms that I've worked with is, their clients complain like, oh, I'm just not motivated. They get to this like point in their CrossFit career, like 3, 4, 5 years, where they just lose motivation. They just see 2159, like, I don't want to do that workout anymore. I just don't feel motivated to do snatches anymore, or whatever the case may be. And I find that, there's just a lack of GPP. They don't have that base of fitness, and they're getting subjected to things that they really haven't earned the right to do that yet. If you haven't really solidified your squat, why are we doing a full clean? There's a disconnect. So I feel that a lot of these gyms just do a lot better when we just simplify the programming quite a bit, and, as you said, have like a template, have a schedule of where things happen within a given week, versus just throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks.
No, you hit it right on the head. I mean, we used to get the majority of people that would come to our seminar and kind of came to us were always like the CrossFitters in year 2, 3, 4, 5 that were kind of burned out. They'd already maxed out all the glycolytic capacity that they ever could get. And now they were in a situation where, like, how am I going to do this faster? I can't go physically any faster. The only way I can get better is to make it lighter. So then we had, and that was a big issue when we taught the seminars, is people were, there were people that were really fit, but just couldn't move any type of loads. And, there was a ton of dysfunction. I mean, navicular drop, collapse this. I mean, just the amount of dysfunction that we saw was extremely beneficial, because then after you start seeing the same dysfunction over and over again, and people are doing the same training system, which looked like nothing but bilateral hip hinging in a sagittal plane. Yeah. And then you put them through a whole bunch of models, like we do resisted sprints, change the direction, and they couldn't do anything. All of a sudden, then you start building a model to fix these people, put that model out, and then you start comparing the two, which is what happened for us in that the model that we were putting out, people would show up and were a lot more well sorted than the people that didn't. And it was interesting to always talk with them and see, hey, where are you on your journey? And it was like, oh, I got into CrossFit, I got super fit, which is, I think for most people, they're like, the thought of being fit when they first go to CrossFit versus what fit looks like 4 or 5 years later are completely two different things. Mm-hmm. If you were to ask the average person on the street, what does fit look like, or what is fit? They'd be like, oh, somebody that has abs, or, a lady who's got nice arms, she's fit. Whereas all of a sudden you go to CrossFit and you see what fit is, and 4 or 5 years later, you realize that those people that are probably doing those WODs aren't real fit, because you throw something heavy in like a, heavy carry, and all of a sudden they're just fucking exploded.
Yeah,
And so,
exactly.
whereas when we went out to West Side, those power lifter dudes, I mean, Louis liked a certain body type, 5'5" to 5'8", anywhere from 275 to 330 pounds to look like a fucking Ram man. And because they need him to squat
That's
big
like
weights.
that guy you were just rolling with.
Oh my God, dude. As I'm sitting here, I'm still like, I can still feel the congestion in my chest and I can still feel my compressed rib. I'm not kidding you, dude. I had, just a side note, we played first round of the playoffs, played the Chicago Bears, and we were down. This was actually the last game at Old Soldier Field. We were down on the goal line, and we ran this little dive play. I was playing left guard right over me, and I had to try to cut this dude, fucking Keith Traylor, who was like 6'2", fucking 365 pounds. And as I hit him, his knee spun, and when he spun, he sat on my helmet. And his ass was so big that it compressed my helmet, and I could hear it going, and I could see my face mask bending, and then it stopped. And then the fat of his ass started coming through my face mask, and it was like literally like a blob coming through me. And I started to freak out, and then I just kind of like closed my eyes, and I was like,
"This is it. This is how it ends."
No, I was like, just calm down. You're gonna, like, if you fucking freak out, you're gonna have a heart, like you're gonna die. And then slowly, I just kind of laid there, and then they like pried him off me, and I saw the fat dissipate. And it reminds me, like, you see like the floods in Florida and the water dissipates, it just goes away. That's what it was like. I stand up and I can't get my helmet off because it's so tight. So I had to go over, and they had to like finally wedge my head out, and I'm smashing the helmet trying to get it back out. But that was not nearly as bad as what happened to me last night. So
pretty serious.
Yeah, I mean, like, this dude, like, he got his arms around me, and if you know jits, like in this body lock position, and he somehow weaseled it in, and like, I was like, fuck, this dude is so fucking strong. And then I remembered, like, if you got to hustle 360, 380 pounds around, even if you don't lift weights and you're doing this, so he has to move his body around other people, that dude's strong as fuck. Like, that guy definitely could help me move a couch. So, just side note, dude. So,
and
yeah.
For free pizza and beer,
As I'm sitting here,
sure.
no, well, he's got a small stomach. He probably eats like a chicklet now. Like, so that's the thing. When they lap band your stomach, now all of a sudden they, like, physically you can only consume like 500 to 800 calories because your stomach's so small that, like, you could eat half a chicken breast. And then they also can't process any fat, so they eat like a high protein diet, severe caloric restriction, and that's how they lose all that weight. But sorry, not to fucking go too far off the rails, but as I'm talking, I could still feel it.
Yes, and so you sold the programming business, Jason. And let's get into
I'm more excited. As excited I am, I'm kind of excited to hear about where you live and like 13 acres, what you guys are doing out there.
Yeah,
Did you build a facility?
has afforded you the opportunity to get off the grid.
I mean, are you purely off the grid? Like, you guys are on
I'm
solar?
No, that wouldn't be accurate. We still get, luckily we still get like Amazon deliveries for our food, which I don't know if you guys use Amazon for food delivery from Whole Foods, but I've got 3 young kids, 6, 4, and 3.
Ooh.
So it is
You're right in the
very
fight,
hard.
dude. You're right in the fight.
We're right in the fight.
Yeah, yeah.
And, it's great, right? I mean, I'm sure everyone says, oh, it's going to be so great when they're older and they're so close in age and yada, yada, yada. But it has been really tricky to do basic things like going food shopping and whatnot. So that has been an invaluable service for us, being able to get food deliveries. Like last night, it was 8:00 and we were out of, I don't know, something they eat for going to school. And it's really great to be able to get those food deliveries. So I'm not off the grid, but I do have 13 acres of land. We've got chickens, we've got ducks, so we consume a lot of eggs. We get, about 10 to 12 eggs a day. And actually they're not producing as well right now because they're, I guess, in this phase of molting, which I've never heard of, but apparently they don't produce as many eggs.
Yeah.
And, we can, my neighbor, I go shoot guns at my neighbor's house. I was in the military, so I still like to kind of keep my skills with shooting intact. We're 700 feet from the road. I mean, I have no neighbors, so I can basically do, we do whatever we want here for the most part. And by whatever I want, I mean, I can plug my electric guitar in outside and turn my amp up all the way and just jam out for an hour if I want to, and no one is going to care. Whereas, we moved from a cul-de-sac, which is a completely different, you go out your back porch and you're basically saying hi to your neighbor. They're right there in plain sight. So it's great where we are and where there's a lot of outdoor activities. We love being outside. Our kids are always outside, getting dirty. And it's a great place to live if you love the outdoors, love the scenery. But it does get pretty cold here. So I like the cold personally. My wife doesn't. I look forward to it. But yeah, it's great.
So we live on a pretty decent piece of property, and the only thing that's a negative of not living in a neighborhood is when your kids get a little older, like finding other kids to go ride bikes and kind of like pal around the neighborhood. So that's been kind of a little bit more of a interesting thing where, like, you know, their friends all have to like take their bikes over to their friends' houses so they can, because some of their friends live in little communities. But yeah,
I agree. And that was the benefit of living in a cul-de-sac. Everyone, you know, the kids were out and, you know, they had tons of friends in the neighborhood. But yeah, it is what it is. So they're definitely, you know, they love being in the woods and being outside playing. I said, getting dirty, and they can certainly do that here.
Nice.
And you got a pretty sweet garage gym set up. I
do. Yes. It's funny. I think back when I started CrossFit, like right before the military, I built a garage gym in my parents' garage. I don't even know if I asked them, but I bought like an old Elite FTS squat rack from some facility that was going out of business. And I dumped that in there, and I just kind of started training from home. And, you know, it was always like a dream to have a home gym, right? I mean, being able to, again, do whatever you want, have that freedom. So it's definitely, it's progressed, and the house that we're in, we built. So we were able to really build out a sweet space just for that gym. You know, and that's where I film all my content, all my videos, and, you know, so I get the added expense, like being able to write it off as a business expense, which is pretty damn cool. That, you know, equipment gets included in that, but I'm pretty set at this point. I've got basically everything I could want or need. So, but I love it. It's an amazing thing to have access to.
No, it's,
and no clients.
Yeah, no clients. I love having a garage gym. I do kind of miss like going to like Gold's Gym or some of the Globo gyms just to people watch a little bit, because I think we somehow get so far removed from it. Periodically, I'd like to go, even though I haven't been in a while. I used to have a membership to the Golds when we first moved out here, and it was just interesting to like take you back and remind you of like, fuck, man, some people are so far off the grid in terms of like where they should be. And what's been wild is, I mean, as you know, dude, there's so much information on social media. Like there's, you know, like we had Gabrielle Lyon on the podcast, and she's a doc and is real big into this, you know, into protein and muscle. She's been saying actually something very similar to what we've been saying for a lot of years, that, you know, most of the people don't need to lose fat. They probably just look better if they gain some muscle. So it's not that we're over fat, we're just probably under muscled.
Right.
And, so there's been this interesting, since we had her on the podcast, I've been kind of like noodling over this idea of like, you know, because she talked about muscle being like the greatest organ we have in terms of longevity. And while that's true, there's an interesting piece of like, is it muscle or is it strength? You know, is it the fact that like people are fat, and is it the fact that they don't carry muscle, or is it that just people are generally weak? And as I've been kind of noodling on this, it's a little bit of both, because, you know, you have to do some form of strength evolution to be able to put on muscle. Sure. I haven't seen anybody just randomly like, oh, I put on 20 pounds of muscle just walking, you know?
Yeah, no.
So, you know, being able to, you know, linear progress or however it is, I mean, being able to do a little bit more than you did the next day and whatever that looks like for people, it's just kind of this interesting debate. And I realized that when you start removing barriers to it, like, oh, I don't have a place to train. All right, well, then now you got a garage gym. I don't know what I'm doing. Like at this point with social media, YouTube, and all the other stuff, like if you don't know what you're doing, you can figure it out real close. And there's always, you know, people like us, people like you to reach out to that'll take it another step. And then the next piece is like, oh, I don't have access to good food. Man, it's probably never been easier to access. You know, you can have it delivered to your house.
Right.
I mean, I still like, I actually physically enjoy going to the grocery store. Whereas Matt Vincent like still blows his mind. He's like, we order everything. We don't ever go to the fucking grocery store. I'm like, I like to go see people. I like to walk around. I like to see what's there. So like we've effectively through either technology or whatever it looks like. I mean, the fact that, and you know this when you bought an Elite FTS rack, like I see these deals pop up where they're like free shipping on 45-pound plates. You know, like it's never been easier to get equipment. Whereas before, you know, we would go down to, we call it Play It Again, was this like resale of used gym equipment place down in Costa Mesa. And we would buy 45 plates for like $20. Mm-hmm. And we'd buy every one they had every time we went there. And so it was like, it's become so much easier. The barrier to entrance is so high or is so low now that it's almost the fact that like there isn't much excuse anymore. And
there isn't. And I think that, you know, COVID brought about this new kind of culture that has home gyms. I mean, I work with a lot of people that have great home gyms, and I'm not talking like they've got some dumbbells and a squat rack. They've got, you know, reverse hypers, you know, GHDs, sleds. I mean, air bike. You go down the list. They've got really a full setup, and I've never seen more people training from home. I think, you know, a lot of these people that really placed their fitness at a very high level of importance said, well, shit, I'm not going to just not go to the gym. So I'm going to buy my own equipment and start training from home. And I've just have never seen so many people with great home setups. And even now, you know, we actually just got on Train Heroic, in August. And, you know, I've seen so many people who've got a private Facebook group posting in there, and I'm like, holy shit, some of these home gyms are literally better than a CrossFit box. You know, so people really invested, which is super cool, because like you said, now there's no excuse. If we get, you know, gyms get shut down again, it's no one should be losing any fitness. They can still get it done from home and get it done, you know, on a very high level.
Yeah, I don't think that anything that looks like a shutdown will ever happen again. No. But I do believe that probably the silver lining of the shutdown and of all the COVID stuff was actually the building of garage gyms. Because right. I'm with you. Like I get tagged in things all the time on social, or I see it pop up where I'm like, fuck, that's a really nice gym.
It's awesome.
I mean, people have like built spaces and lights and like have done some really amazing things where I'm like, shit, dude. Like I know we had to up our game, and you know, at our gym here, and like, you know, add neon and dumbbells, and you know, we were kind of like, holy shit, dude, these people are leaving us behind. We got to up our
people take
game.
It serious. I mean, there's pages. I mean, you've probably seen like garage gym reviews. I remember the guy that started that Coop, like back when, you know, he had like no followers. It was, you know, just kind of this small movement. I mean, he actually, I think he's got like a full-time gig now with just garage gym reviews. You guys probably know better than I do, but I mean, I saw him in his YouTube channel. He actually did a feature on my gym. This is in my old house. He posted the video tour that I did, and I've seen his channel just grow like astronomically. And it's, again, people are taking it very seriously, which is awesome. I mean, I love it. I love seeing it. I would say that I'm a little bit more simplistic. Like I don't really. I've actually tried to decrease the amount of shit I have. At one point, you know, when I sold my gym, I had an ATP from Westside. I had an inverse leg curl, and those are things I took with me. And I had that shit in my home gym. Like, do I really need a fucking ATP in my garage gym? I'm the only person using it. It's a great piece of equipment, but I actually
we have one. Yeah, we have one.
It's phenomenal, but you know, you've got 500 square feet at best, and that thing takes up basically, you know, half of the floor space. I ended up selling it to my buddy, who you guys may or may not know, Murph. He owns TPS in right outside of Boston, Total Sports Performance. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's the lead FTS guy. But anyways, I ended up selling it to him. Like, you know, this doesn't make any sense for me to have this. You've got people that are going to use this thing every day, and it's just taking up space for me. So.
No, we use it. So we do a ton of warm up stuff, especially with the fighters we've been working with. Just basic marches, you know, like med ball throws, and I love it for calf raises. So donkey calf raises is like my favorite one for that. But we do a ton of stuff on that thing. I mean, we've had one. Man, I think I've had that unit. I mean, so we don't have the adjustable arms on it. It's the old school one. Mm-hmm. I think we got that in like 2012. So I've had it 10 years, and use that thing at least a couple times a week. So yeah, reverse hyper. I remember that was the first piece of equipment I bought for my own personal gym that was in the downstairs of my house. I had a wood weight treadmill, I had a squat rack, had weights, had adjustable dumbbells, and a reverse hyper. And that was, when I wasn't, so when I played, I went up to Athletes Performance.
Yeah.
And then I would kind of train there with my brothers. And then I got tired of going to Athletes Performance. So I actually ended up training at a CrossFit gym, which is how I got involved and exposed to CrossFit. Because actually they were the only ones in the area that had bumper plates. So I had to drive 45 minutes to an hour to Carson to Athletes Performance, where Mark Verstegen's place was. It was the only place that had, bumper plates and platforms. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like, somebody's like, oh, there's this gym up the street that has bumper plates. And I was like, oh, really? So I went up there and was like, hey, can I do my, Olympic stuff here? And they were like, yeah, sure. Come in. And I'm like, what the fuck is this place? Feels like I'm like, and it ended up being CrossFit Newport Beach.
Well, it's funny. I think I remember seeing that because I got involved with CrossFit in like 2006. And I feel like for whatever reason, I never got to a CrossFit football seminar. I feel like there was something that it stopped at one point, right? I don't remember I remember seeing you on the site on like CrossFit.com.
Well, CrossFit.com had removed CrossFit football from their webpage in 2009.
So when we launched, there was CrossFit, and then on the left there was CrossFit Kids, and then CrossFit Football was underneath it because there was only, I think CrossFit Football and CrossFit Kids were the only two licensed like versions of their own CrossFit, whereas all the other SMEs were like teaching an element of CrossFit. Mine was my own kind of adaptation for power athletes on CrossFit, and then CrossFit Kids obviously different. And then Glassman got upset at Rob and I over something, and when I wouldn't publicly fucking cut Rob Wolf's head off, they basically took me off of the front page of CrossFit. And I was like, oh, all right, well, I'll just hang around until you break up with me. And it took them another.
Well, 2017, we rode off into the sunset.
Yeah, they finally broke up with us. It was like, I'm sure maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but we've all probably dated somebody. We're like, God, I just wish this person would break up with me so we could just go on our separate ways, because I wasn't enough of a man to do it myself. And that was what my relationship with CrossFit was. We were like just kind of hanging out there and like, oh, I wonder if they're going to break up with us one day. And it took them a number of years, and it was over a steak.
Hey, I benefited greatly from that dysfunctional relationship. I've seen the world, and I am so grateful for the opportunity.
For all the craziness and wackiness that we were involved with CrossFit HQ and Glassman and them, I would never go back and do it any other way. Just for the fact that we got a chance to put out free programming and then travel the world from the Arctic Circle to New Zealand and back and meet the people doing the program and actually hear the real world results. So whereas I think some people, let's say you got a gym of 40, 50 people, we got a chance to literally put our hands on thousands of people over, 10 years, 9 years. The number comes into, which is wild to think. And just people from different walks of life, different training. You show up to a gym, people walk in and they're like, we've been following the program. I'm like, I can fucking tell you've been following the program.
Or they're multi-attendees, so they would attend 1 year and they'd be one person, and then you see them the next year.
And they
like,
would almost, they would almost use it as like a little bit of AAR, like, do I got all my shit in one sock?
Yeah, right.
Can I test my training again in this deal? And people would show up, and I remember on numerous occasions, people would be like, oh, hey, like, I'm talking with them, and then they're like, oh, I was here 2 years ago, and then they would like, I'd be like, holy shit, that's you? Like, all of a sudden this dude's put on 20 pounds of muscle and looks great. All of a sudden they're eating a high protein diet, not fucking 7 zone blocks a day. They're banging heavy weights or throws. All this stuff. And it was amazing for me just because I had a lot of theories on programming. But the problem is they all started with me, and I'm, 6'6", played in the NFL. So I obviously have a certain genetic advantage over certain people. Sure. And so what I always worry is that, you fail at the margins of your experience, and like, just because something works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for other people. And that's what drove me fucking crazy about programming is everybody's like, hey, this is how I squatted 1,000 pounds. You can squat 1,000 pounds too. And you're like, well, shit. One, I'm not 5'5", 300 pounds, right. So there was just a lot of failures for me in that I had theories and, like you said, obviously we had always done some form of conjugate, Olympic lifting, West Side sprint, kind of Charlie Francis deal. And I knew what worked for me and I knew what worked for my friends, but I wasn't as convinced with just normal people. And then I got to the foundation that if you can just teach people the basics and then progress them on and get them really strong, teach them to sprint, get a little capacity. The one thing, somebody actually asked me this the other day, the only 2 things that never got easy in my life were lifting weights. The weights never got light, and sprinting never got easy. There isn't a day that I got done sprinting where I was like, oh, that's not bad. Let's do that again.
Yeah.
And so, like, whereas everything else, I mean, we got pretty good at CrossFit where you fucking do some burner, you fucking sit down for a second, you get up and you're ready to go again. And you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. I think I could do another one. But sprinting and lifting weights, those two. So if after all these years, if those two are still the most demanding, it probably have to like put a ton of emphasis on those, like lifting heavy weights and running as fast as you can.
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly.
This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market.
We've built our online training business by partnering with Train Heroic and helping us deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training.
And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best tech and training, go to trainheroic.co/powerathletehq. And now back to the show. Do most of your clients now, are they still going for that fitness realm, or are you starting to explore athleticism development at all?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Once I got to the point with box programming, like working with gyms, and I had a coach working for me that was running the business. It got tricky because you're getting a lot, like you just said, John. You're getting a lot of different data points, and we had at one point, about 40,000 people using the programming a day across the globe. So there was a lot of great things that came from that. But what got tricky for me was I just certainly fell out of alignment with classic CrossFit, trying to fit in different style of workouts, trying to fit in hero workouts and some of the things I just didn't want to do anymore. I didn't want to have, general fitness people doing Olympic lifting. Didn't make sense to me. I didn't want them to be doing any kipping at all. So for me, it just made sense to kind of go a different direction. And I had a lot of individuals that were, I like to call it like the everyday athlete. They're people that did CrossFit for 5-6 years, and they just, kind of like myself, kind of fell out of love with it and wanted to train in a more sustainable way. But they're still concerned with their metrics. They still want to see improvement across the board. They still want to train for maximal strength and, speed strength, and just go down the list of different qualities. And that's what really kind of brought about doing more individual programming. And, Conjugate X conditioning was like the marriage of using the conjugate system, but then using zone 2 style work as really kind of that bridge between those harder training sessions, between your max effort or your dynamic effort sessions. So that's the people that I work with now are predominantly from CrossFit. And they just, again, have, 9 out of 10 do not want to Olympic lift anymore. 9 out of 10 do not want to do a kipping anything. And, they do really well in this style of training because it lends itself to not only their goals and their needs, where their training status is, but also their personality type. They're still able to push it at certain times in a more strategic way and see that carry over to multiple qualities of fitness. And I obviously think that, a lot of the people too are definitely, just as concerned with their body composition. So a lot of the stuff that we're doing really works well for those individuals that, again, fall out of love with CrossFit. And there's, I can't tell you guys how many, I'm sure you see the same thing, but there's so many people that have the same story that I interact with. It's almost like this can't be the same story again. It's the same story. And I'm not talking just like, 10 or 20 people. We're talking hundreds of people. I mean, we've got about 300 people on the Train Heroic app right now. And it's like, we just started it and they're all saying really the same things, which is, again, always interesting to me to see. But, the success that they're having, just following a more structured plan and in removing a lot of those elements that they simply just are not in alignment with their goals or their needs anymore.
How do they find you? Were you leading some of their former box programs, or they just found you via Google's?
Yeah. So, I think that leading up to this point, what I did back when I started box programming is every time I had a question, I would just write an article for it. So I had a lot of questions because, again, we were doing things that were really outside of the box, so to speak, with CrossFit programming. So, people would say like, hey, well, why are we doing loaded carries or sleds or, or, go down a list of different modalities that we would utilize. So I wrote an article about basically everything. I started, I had articles published on Elite FTS. I ended up becoming a columnist for them. So I write an article regularly for them. And so collectively over the last 6 years, there's about 1,000 articles I've written, whether it be T Nation, Elite FTS, or Dr. John Russin or Christian Thibodeau, go down the list of different sites as well as my own website. So there's a lot of pieces of content that I didn't really necessarily see a return back then. And this kind of goes back to the people that asked me, like, well, how do I gain clients? I did a lot of shit for free, a lot of free content, a lot of free programs, a lot of free downloads, yeah. Building the mailing list and just doing all these things that were, I wasn't seeing a return then, but now, I have basically all that goodwill that I put in, and it's now paying off for me. So a lot of people come from articles. Hey, I read that article you wrote on Elite FTS. I mean, I've written some ones that went pretty far. Most of the articles I wrote that, I don't want to say bashed CrossFit, but like, some of them were like, hey,
you can say that.
Let's do, one of them was CrossFit Smarter. Like I wrote for Dr. John Russin's site, and it was like, people, most people agreed, but there are, of course, a lot of people that have a very visceral reaction to, speaking about CrossFit in any negative way. And, to be completely honest, guys, like I don't love getting in debates and arguing with people and that stuff. I think putting yourself out there and saying like, hey, listen, I'm going to take a stance, whether or not you agree with me. For me personally, that was hard. I mean, even putting myself out there with all the content was hard. And it's still hard, even after doing it so long. But I do feel like that is the piece that, if I was going to, if anyone asked me, how do you build an online business? I would say, well, you got to put yourself out there. And you got to write content. You got to give free value. Like
George and I had a great conversation on it. And he's like, people want to be successful, but they don't realize how much time goes into building your brand, building your name, building your ethos. He's like, it takes 10 years. And then all of a sudden, like, then you look like an overnight success. It takes you 10 years to be an overnight success. Mm-hmm. So, building brand loyalty and doing all the little things, creating relationships, being a, good person and not a complete fucking shitbag, which I think is why a lot of people get spun out. But it just takes time.
It does.
And I don't know how you go back and recreate that, but I tell people like, shit, man, people are doing it every single day.
Yeah. And I feel like we're just we're like a society of just like, everything's so quick. It's so instant. You want food, you just hit a button and you get a food delivery. And I do see a lot of the younger, trainers and coaches that are making the shift to online, that are expecting it to, to happen quickly, where you're selling, and I think a lot of people are starting out with just one-on-one, but even if you're trying to sell a training program, and if you haven't really shown people, I remember seeing Joe DeFranco at a seminar years ago, and he said the only reason he got Triple H as a client because he wrote for, I don't know, over a decade, he was writing free training on his website. And, Triple H found it and was applying a lot of the things that Joe was saying. And needless to say, like he didn't see any return back then, but, fast forward a decade down the road and Triple H says, well, I just, I took all your free advice and I saw that it fucking worked. And I was like, holy shit, this guy, obviously knows what he's talking about. And that was the catalyst for him reaching out and, wow, Triple H becoming a client of Joe DeFranco. So,
dude, West Side for Skinny Bastards, I think last time I looked, had more hits and more like which is so ironic that West Side for Skinny Bastards was more successful than anything out of West Side.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like it was kind of a conjugate / bodybuilding, like pick 5 accessory or 5 movements, rotate through them. There was a little bit of volume, a little bit of max effort, a little bit of, I don't necessarily know if he had any dynamic work. It was more like max effort and rep. But I remember looking at it and being like, it's pretty fucking basic. And the amount of people that when he put that program out, downloaded it and used it, far outpaced. And it might have been when he was at the event, that Elite FTS. He
2014 or 15. So, one of those two.
But yeah, I mean, he was like, we've had this program downloaded X amount of time, and it's probably, more people.
Your whole mailing list.
Yeah, I mean, more people know probably West Side for Skinny Bastards than they actually know West Side. Yeah. So, I mean, man, as we're sitting here, I'm thinking about my introduction for Westside. My roommate in college was a big power lifter, and he had the Westside bench videos in VHS. And I remember we watched them, and they were all fucking grainy and super shitty. And at the end, there was a phone number, and it was like call, and literally you could call and talk to Louis. And so it was, let me think about Louis selling those videotapes to people, mail order, probably packing them, Doris packing them up herself and sending them out. And the fact like that so many people copied and handed them out, the viral nature of it, which I mean, probably exploded on it and was probably way better than, pay for a download. I mean, just, it's like bands giving away burner CDs, hoping that people, copy them and give them to their friends. I mean, ironically, I was in the car yesterday taking my daughter, and I made her, she watched Stranger Things. So now she's all into like the 80s. So she had me make her like an 80s playlist. And like, as we're in there listening to Metallica, Master of Puppets, which, is fucking standard. She's like, hey Dad, when was the first time you heard this? I'm like, I heard it on a mixtape that my friend burned me. So my friend gave me a mixtape that he had made with like Master of Puppets. And I was like, and I was trying to explain to my daughter what a mixtape was and how this whole thing goes, and like, that there were these things that when they get fucked up, you had to put a pencil in and screw them in. It was probably about 30 minutes, and she's just looking at me and being like, how fucking old are you? And I'm like, yeah, but you like this song? She's like, it's great. I'm like, yeah, it was as fucking hot then as it was then, and the quality's way better, but it's interesting when you start thinking about the perspective of how long it takes to actually become an overnight success. I'm sure people hit you up and you're like, dude, we did a lot for free. We were just at the right time for this thing, and now we're kind of reaping the benefits.
Yeah, I have that conversation with my wife all the time about like just the progression of like going from CDs or even tapes to CDs to where we're at present day, and it's very interesting. But I think that definitely is it holds true. I mean, you got to do a lot for free, and I think that it's all about providing free value. So if you're giving away, I heard a quote from some marketing guru, and I'm not, just a caveat here. I don't know a whole lot about marketing. My wife is actually involved with my business. So luckily I have her to handle that side of things. But they said, if you're giving away so much that it makes you want to throw up, then you're doing it right. And, I really do think that that's the case. I think that everyone wants to like think that they have the secret sauce that they're, if you give it to them, like you're giving away the keys to the kingdom, when in reality, I see that the more you give away, with whether it be programs, templates, or whatever the case may be, I feel like it almost makes people more compelled to want to work with you or even, spend money with you. So I tell that to a lot of people, but I think that the necessary step that needs to happen before any of that is, you got to do the time in the trenches. You got to, like you said, the testing process and figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and having that breadth of knowledge where you can then, be in a position to confidently give that program or those strategies to a potential client you're working with.
How's your TikTok game?
Not good.
I'm glad to know we're not the only ones with a weak TikTok game.
Yeah, no, TikTok. So we try to repurpose like Instagram Reels, and we hired a VA from I think Fiverr or somewhere, and we try to repurpose that stuff, like where it's like an Instagram Reel gets repurposed as TikTok, which there's a whole different thing happening there, so it doesn't work that easily, unfortunately. But then we repurpose those as YouTube Shorts now too, and those are like hit or miss, which again is. There's so many different languages to all this stuff. I think what we've seen with just, IG is really our go-to. We've seen, and this happened recently, we actually, I think over the last couple of weeks, we've gained 5,000 new followers. And we started doing longer carousel posts. And you guys can look at any of there's about 6 or 7 of them there. And they are very, very simple. A lot less science. So just kind of like simplifying. One of them is, about a method that I use called the 6-12-25 method. You've probably heard of it from Charles Poliquin.
Yeah.
And it basically encompasses all 3 tenets of hypertrophy, mechanical tension, muscle damage, and metabolic stress. And I've used it quite a bit over the years. I've written articles for T Nation about it. That one got 6,000 saves and a 300,000 reach.
Wow.
So I think just from that one, we gained 1,000 followers. So my wife's been taking a lot of the content that I've made and kind of making it funny and simplifying it. And the interaction for those is just done incredibly well. I mean, I think, again, it's IG and those places have turned into quick, the 3-second reel crushes the one that you put time into, and there's, a bit of nuance to, don't do as even close to as well. So I think that it's just, again, all the things I think we're talking about in this episode have been kind of the same thing. Simplified, quick bits of information that are easy to understand, digestible, and, if you have a little bit of humor in there, I think it certainly helps.
Yeah, no, I do. I'm forever interested on like the algorithms and really what hits. And I think IG is pretty interesting in that I think people just want to be quickly entertained. Mm-hmm. I know that they're also, I've actually watched way too much information because Antonio kicked it my way, who's the video guy on the other side, about like the new algorithms and like, their idea of battling TikTok. So now that like the Instagram reels are being prefaced in terms of like static pictures. So now people are like posting pictures, like multiple pictures as Instagram reels. And it's so weird. You can dive into these fucking rabbit holes. And I'm like, God damn. When I was joking with Antonio, I'm like, I just wasted like 3 hours of my fucking life.
Yeah.
That, probably some 14-year-old girl figured out way faster than me. And I think because in my mind I have a hard time. I think it's interesting. Like, I mean, I know Paul Quinn's system, and I've always argued with him on the time under tension stuff. I never thought that actually giving somebody a controlled time in terms of concentric movements made any sense. And I actually went to one of his original deals back in the day, and Derek Woodsky, who taught for him, is a good friend of ours, so we've had good conversations. But I mean, dude, there's so much cool shit that people don't even remember. Like we were talking the other day on Mauro de Pasquale's anabolic diet. And, the father of carb cycling, and people are like, oh, everybody's talking about carb cycling. I'm like, well, yeah, no, this dude did it way back when. So it's interesting how, what I think the word is, like people's
time is a flat circle. It's cyclical.
No, it's just basically their ability to like process information is so quick that it's almost like, and I'm sure you've seen this, you put something out and it didn't hit, and then like a week later you probably put it out and it hit.
That's the T-Nation model, John.
Well, you change the title, or I mean, there's just so many different variables, and I think that, again, I feel like the simpler the better. My wife makes reels that do really well. She made one of me sitting at the computer, and it was like 3 ways to improve your programming: improve your exercise order, improve your sets, reps, and rest intervals. I forget what the other one was, but that one crushed, and it literally took her 4 seconds to make it. Whereas like I'm making one, it's like plyometrics and going through like it's way too complex, and in the same token, it takes me 2 hours to make it. So it's like, where's the return? Simple, the quick, the easy, the ones that, again, people don't have to think about. And, for me, as someone that wants to educate and give them the why, that's a hard shift. I mean, I'm sure you guys the same way. Like, you want to tell someone why and give them some legitimacy to what you're giving them. And that's not necessarily the thing that's going to do well and reach more people.
No, a nice butt and a big cans. I mean, that's really the best way to sell on Instagram.
This is the challenge of the numbers game.
But Tex is the only one that puts out the peach pictures. So
I got the peach to prove it. But Jason, the numbers game doesn't always tell the story, because you are finding your people that do appreciate and value that. Like scanning through your Elite FTS and just a quick scan here, I can see just the evolution of your wording from, hey, conjugate for the Gen Pop to then now conjugate for the everyday athlete. Mm-hmm. And seeing how that is evolving as an educator, I do appreciate that, because you're not just spitting the same thing. You're finding a different way to then connect with your people, your audience. Sure. I do like everyday athlete, because we beat to death the dead horse that is General Pop.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, there's an interesting distinction, I think, Tex and I actually talked about this the other day. We have historically always trained athletes. Athletes at a certain point need strength, they need muscle, they need all these other things, opposed from like writing program that's purely hypertrophy based, where your only goal is hypertrophy. And like so there's like an interesting thing when like, what's my outcome? I want people to be strong. I don't want them to be fast. I want to be able to move well. Whereas I think on the hypertrophy side, when you go down that, like, what does it really matter? And even though those people maybe move well, like the focus, like I'm constantly in this, like when I'm watching stuff, like I'm not as concerned with, oh, that guy needs to squat more, his legs are bigger. I'm like, is he moving the weight from point A to point B well? And everything, is it aesthetically pleasing? Is he doing these things as intended? If he's deadlifting and he's extremely long legs, short torso, what does his back angle look like? How can I make this more efficient? Whereas, in other movements where if it's purely hypertrophy, I probably would never have him deadlift. And we've had people that are, hey, I just need to put on some muscle, and we have some programming for that. But even on that side, I still have this heavily biased towards wanting people to move well and be a good athlete. Just sticking somebody in a selectorized machine and, realizing that when I create stability and can push them to failure, this is where the bounds of hypertrophy are found, but yet do nothing for all the other elements of balance and coordination and movement and being able to move through space well. So there's always this constant battle where, and I know that there's a ton of people on Train Heroic and throughout that all they want to do is create max hypertrophy. But like for me, if I see a jack dude, that looks great, but I'm more impressed if I see somebody run well. So like there's this constant fucking battle in my head. And I'm sure you saw in the CrossFit gym, we had people that would come in and start training with us and like, I want to do all these things. I'm like, I just need you to move better so that when I watch you doing something, I don't want to go like wrap you in a blanket and tackle you to the ground so you don't fucking hurt yourself. Thing like, knees caving, navicular drop, where all of a sudden that now it's a biomarker for ACL tears. And we're like, well, shit, dude, if you have such bad knee cave and navicular drop that if I ask you to change direction, there's a good chance when you get stronger, you're going to blow an ACL. So being able to fix these things and make people more efficient movers while balancing all the other elements of like rest and recovery and do I look good naked to go on vacation has been this like, it's as Louis described it once to me, programming's a lot like moving dials on an EQ. Like you hear the noise, it might sound somebody good, but you have to tune it, and you have all these different buttons, and you have to tune it so that it's just right, and every song is going to be slightly different. I thought that was the best analogy I came across for programming.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one. I think that, one of the other things that, you kind of alluded to there is that, CrossFit will give you the foundational movement patterns, and they'll give you the standard of, let's use a squat, for example, shoulder width stance, toes slightly pointed out, hip crease below the knee is a standard. Well, that's a standard. That's an arbitrary standard. It doesn't take into there's no anthropometric considerations with that. Should anyone squat below parallel? I mean, it really comes down to the person, right? The individual in terms of where they can express their most authentic position, while maintaining a neutral spine. So being able to tailor that to the individual, I think, is something that's lost. The deadlift is inherently a good movement. Deadlift is not a good movement for everyone, though. Some people will make them worse off. And I think that, that's the challenge with group, is that you're putting everyone into the same bubble. Again, like our Train Heroic program is a great program. Is it for everyone? No, certainly not. It's the best program. No, if I said it was the best program, I'd be, lying.
It's the best for somebody out there. There's somebody that's the best program.
But you know what? When I work with someone one-on-one, I still work with people one-on-one, and I put them through a movement assessment. I mean, I'm not going to have someone just squat to squat. I want to see you squat. I want to see what is authentic for you. What, even in terms of the stance and toe position. And again, that's not $27 a month. That's a premium service. That's me working with someone one-on-one where we can really individualize it. But I think that, we, as a whole, it seems like one of the things that I just got to a point with CrossFit, whereas again, we're making everyone Olympic lift. We're making someone that just wants to look good in their bathing suit, do snatches and kipping pull-ups for time. That to me just didn't make sense. I just didn't feel right doing that anymore.
So, especially when people, and this was, and I'm sure you guys found the same thing in your gym. People wanted to kip because they couldn't do strict pull-ups.
Right.
And like, that was like a big deal for me. And I'm like, hey man, like, believe me, you're going to be a lot happier when you can do a few strict pull-ups and you can do 50 kipping pull-ups. I never felt like, so that was a big change in mindset where they, because of course people jump on, they see the CrossFit, oh, people are doing these swinging pull-ups and I can get a pull-up that way. And I'm like, yeah, but when you do that, you don't have the strength and musculature to protect yourself in the eccentric load. And now you're letting go, you hit that end range. Now all of a sudden, are you strong enough to protect yourself? And that's what was really fascinating. And I think the narrative that I built in, at least at our gym when we started working with people, was like, I need you to be strong enough to protect yourself from this training. Because what we're doing here is not, I'm going to ask you to swing a heavy kettlebell. I mean, there's a lot of movements that, if done poorly, will fuck you up. Right. And, I remember the first CrossFit seminar I went to way back in the day, Tony Budding sitting up there with a shirt that says CrossFit smoke you like cheap crack and a hat that said, this will fuck you up. And they were wearing this shit as a badge of honor that they were fucking people up. Right. And, I show up and I'm like, yeah, I mean, if you've never had anybody tap into this glycolytic capacity shit, like this will fuck people up, and it does. And but then all of a sudden you start seeing where the lug nuts are loose, and that was like my analogy. I'm like, man, the lug nuts are loose. We got to tighten the lug nuts up, which means we got to back it off. We got to make you stronger. And then all of a sudden, when we can do all this foundation work, you can go 100 miles an hour and go show up at any CrossFit gym and do fucking well. But it takes foundation. And certain people walked in and they were pretty well sorted. And the one thing which is nice, especially with CrossFit today, you turn it on, everybody's a good fucking mover. Mm-hmm. Like, you watch, whoever the top guys are, like there's no slop, there's no inefficiency. No. Everybody's extremely strong. They all move well. They all look the part, and they're extremely efficient because there's no way to win unless you are good and efficient. Right. Whereas if you go back and you look at like the CrossFit Games from fucking 10 plus years ago, when I did it, you saw a lot of fucking shit where you were like, holy hell, this person's going to die. Yeah. So it's come a long way. And
no, it has for sure. I think that's another thing too. The motto of this will fuck you up. I mean, there's a point of diminishing returns. We know that. We know how the body responds to stress. And I think that if someone's already chronically stressed out, do they need more intensity in their training? Probably not. I would say they probably need to learn some strategies to bring their stress levels down, and maybe it's as simple as just doing a little bit of zone 2 work to de-stress them. And every time I have someone from CrossFit come work with me one-on-one, which I have everyone I work with right now is from CrossFit. They're always surprised by how much better results they get with less, like addition by subtraction. We do a lot less and we get even better results. I always say, like, if you could make more money and work less hours, would you? And the answer is invariably yes, but it's always interesting when they see that that's the case.
Where do you feel the pressure as a gym owner is coming from to program snatches and circle pull-ups and stuff that they can't necessarily coach well?
Is that because, I've always felt that for CrossFit, and I know CrossFit HQ has tried to get away from this, but the games always kind of was the tail wagging the dog.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess those things do find their way into the open, so maybe they're preparing their athletes. Well,
and people are dialed in on social media, and if you you go to a CrossFit gym and all of a sudden you follow the hashtag for CrossFit, you're going to see all the CrossFit superstars who are pretty good Olympic lifters, and I'll tell you this, I remember. So we did some really shitty Olympic lifting in high school, and it pretty much was hilarious. We would... I
think we all did. We played football.
We would power clean until the weight didn't go up as power clean, and then you just would deadlift the weight. So you'd start at 135, 155, and you just kept going up in power cleaning, and then you get to the point where you just missed the power clean. So then they would just pack on more weight, and we would deadlift it. It was so fucked.
Well, we had split cleans, but instead of like a forward into a jerk footwork, it'd be you get your feet as wide as you can until you do the splits.
Yeah, that's standard. That's standard, right? Because nobody actually explained that if you just widen a little bit and drop into a squat, like it was one of those things where until I saw somebody Olympic lift well, I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. So my when I went to college, we had a strength coach named Eric Cohn, who's kind of a power lifter. Olympic lifted, was pretty good. But like the demos were never very good. And then we got this guy, Todd Rice, who was a pure Olympic lifting coach. And he watched us, all of a sudden he's showing us all these like Bulgarian weightlifting videos that either he had filmed or somebody had.
Well, yeah, I know he had traveled overseas to China and
Bulgaria.
Yeah.
So he actually had been in the training halls in Bulgaria and had his camcorder. And like the videos he had were incredible. I mean, these dudes are like shoes, maybe a set of sweats, no underwear, no shirt, smoking cigarettes, and like fucking clean and jerking 450 pounds. And then they were always doing some form of like PAP, post-activation potentiation. Like they would do like a heavy, clean and jerk, walk over, and then do like a standing like 50-inch box jump. And then hop down with and then grab their cigarette. And there was always a ton, and that was where I was first exposed to like post-activation potentiation training, which has always been a big piece of my stuff. Do something heavy, do something dynamic, and then obviously built on what Cal Dietz has done with triphasic and French contrast. But until I saw those videos, I was like, oh fuck, dude, this would have solved so many problems if I could have just seen somebody do this well. And it's pretty exciting to see dudes move weight that well and be that dynamic, because as a football player, you're like, fuck, if I can sit in the bottom of a squat and pull 500 pounds and all of a sudden stand up and then jerk it over my head, how well am I going to do on the field? So I think for me personally, Olympic lifting, there was like a 1-to-1 where it's like, holy shit, dude, those dudes are pretty dynamic and explosive. And if I can be dynamic, explosive, I can play this game. Whereas I think now with, people go to a CrossFit gym, they click on it and they see the, CrossFit superheroes over there doing this stuff, and they think, why not me? Why can't I do that? Shouldn't we do it? Isn't this CrossFit? And then they walk in and you're like, yeah, but they're also in their early 20s. They've been real proficient at this. You're a 40-year-old mother of 3 who, maybe has a shoulder impingement. It's not going to work out the same way.
No, I mean, if it did, if all we had to do was just train harder, then we would all be Rich Froning, right? We'd all be, look like him and move like him and be as resilient as him. But I mean, that's not the case. That's why there's, one Rich Froning and one Matt Fraser, and all of these top athletes that are very much gifted, and are suited to do that, and obviously are pushing themselves and being able to tolerate and take in the training and not burn out or get hurt.
Well, and they've also loaded it over years. That was another thing I explained to people. I'm like, oh, those guys start with one workout.
There's a specific term.
Is it called linear progression?
Gradation.
Gradation.
That's why the success for the female athletes that get into the sport of fitness, their gymnastics backgrounds or their swimming backgrounds, that high volume at a young age, then they don't need as much, as you mentioned earlier, Jason, to have success at it. So that's called gradation over time. All of our reps count.
Well, the same thing applies for football. Because whenever you meet people, be like, oh my God, how come NFL players aren't dying from those hits? If an average person took that hit, they would die.
Terry Tate or that protester.
Yeah. And I try to explain it to him. I'm like, well, dude, you start taking these hits when you're a little kid. Let's say you're high school, let's say 14. And then as you get bigger and stronger, everybody else gets bigger and stronger, and the hits get kind of, it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe, alcohol would be a good example where like the first time you drank, like you get super sick, and then over time, if you want to linear progress it. But
I know people that drink every day and function. So it's definitely going to be true.
and then all of a sudden, so I didn't realize it, whenever we'd have people on the sidelines who were, not obviously football players, like I've had numerous people that were on the sidelines be like, holy fuck, I've never seen people move this fast and hit this hard. Like, how are you guys not dead? And I'm like, I don't know. Just this is what we do, and this is how we've been doing it for a long time. And so I just got into, somebody asked me about Tua.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah, with those hits, like why is it that just hitting his head on the turf like that had reduced those responses? I'm like, well, one, he's not a very big dude. So the way the NFL is turned now, guys that probably weren't physically able to play are able to play the game because of what they've done in terms of hitting. So Tua is just not a very big dude, not very durable. And I'm like, man, I played with quarterbacks that fucking got smashed by 300-pound dudes and got up and were fine. So like, is there a durability factor? I mean, I think the way that the game is turned in terms of the quarterbacks now, all of a sudden you saw that deal where that guy kind of laid on Tom Brady for a minute, and they called roughing the passer. And then Troy Aikman's about to get fired because he's like, Jesus, can we take the dresses off these guys? And I don't know if you heard that.
No, but I love it.
Now the woke mob's going after him about, he's he's being but it's if you've played football at any length in time, some coaches probably said, hey, put your big girl panties on, take your dress off, leave your purse in. Like, they've just made that's, and so fuck those people. But
I mean, I don't know how you play. I mean, the way the game has gone. I mean, again, like the Tom Brady thing is a good example. How do you adjust your playing to fit that standard?
Jason, what position were you?
I think
I played running
personally,
back.
I think what happens is you basically, these guys, and so the way that they kick you in the balls isn't on the field. 15-yard penalty is 50-yard penalty. It's when you get the $100,000 or $50,000 fine the next day in your office, or you show up and there's a FedEx envelope there where you get fined $25,000 or $50,000, and you're like, oh fuck, I just played this last week for free.
Do you have to formally pay it, or they cut it out of your paycheck?
No, they just take, you don't get your paycheck.
Okay.
They just take it right out, and then you have to appeal it. And then you get on with the appeal, and it's like one dude. It's actually funny. It's Runyon now, which is even more hilarious because Runyon was such a gross abuser of that. And,
that's why they got him in.
Well,
He's
I know
well-versed.
that's why they got it. And then Runyon decides whether or not this is legit or not. And so, long story short, the players end up, I think, having that in the back of their head. So you watch them rush the passer or do certain things, and I see guys pull up constantly. When I'd be like, man, I would have taken that fucking shot or this or this. I mean, I don't know if you watched the game last night, but is it Kelce, the tight end for
Travis Kelce? Yeah.
Oh my God, he I've never in my life seen. He runs this basic little route to the end zone, turns, and as the guy's coming for him, you see him have this split second. Like in years past, as that ball was in the air, they would have just fucking annihilated the tight end. He didn't. He took a step going for the ball and then realized that he wasn't going to get it. So then he had to turn back, and Kelce, it was the worst indecision I've ever seen, because that guy knows that if he hits him the way he should, he's going to get fined. Mm-hmm. And so now these guys are playing it's a bad game of 7-on-7, and it's because the NFL they're spending $500 million for a guy like Mahomes. They want to see him score points because that's what's big on fantasy, and they don't want these $100 million dudes getting hurt. So it's easier just to neuter the defense and make the game. Just take the pads off. Let's just go 7-on-7. It's like watching it last night. Kelsey's an incredible player. He's on the Mount Rushmore with Tony Gonzalez for tight ends, but it's frustrating to watch because Jason Whitlock even had a deal football's a violent game, and that's why it's entertaining. It's not entertaining when you remove the violence, and it's awful that Tua hits his head and has this thing, but at some point you're like, dude,
that's what you signed up for.
It's part of the deal.
It's the same thing in the military with all of the repercussions of not having positive identification if you fire your weapon, and that's hung over your head. I look at law enforcement today. You can't do anything wrong. So in that instance, with law enforcement as the example, a split second could be your life, right? You decide you're not going to pull the trigger because you're scared of the repercussions. You could die because of that. And I think that, anytime you have someone that's second guessing under whether it's a football game or law enforcement and pulling a car over, you have to think about how to act, then it's going to change the process. And there is going to be some negative side effect of that. And hopefully it's not your life, but it could very well be.
Well, it's why you lift weights and you train, and you put on muscle and size, and I think because of just observation wise, these guys have been just such in the cradle for so long, and it's because they're super talented, and I think because of high school and college, and I'm not saying they're prima donnas by any means. It's not all what I'm saying, but because of how athletes are treated, and maybe these guys have shown such aptitude at such a young age that maybe they haven't been forced into the crucible they would have been X amount of years ago. And I remember, Tom Brady came out and he's like, if the rules hadn't changed and it was like my first X amount of years in the NFL, I would have never been able to play as long as I have. The only reason I've been able to play 20 plus years was because it's completely changed. And if the first 10 years of my career, or even less, that first 9 years of the career were like this, I could have played 30. So I just don't think that it's as physical. And I think as a result, man, when these dudes do get hit, it's a lot more catastrophic.
Yeah, for sure.
Just probably bringing somebody in. As you remember, the original thing at CrossFit was fucking Fight Club. Show up on your first day. There is no fucking on-ramp. There is no scaling. If your first day's Murph, you're going to get fucking Murph. I mean, we had people show up to our gym and like it was something awful, and it was their first day, and
Yeah.
they get into it, get implode, and we would never hear from them again.
Yeah.
To the point where we were like, maybe we need like a beginner introduction WOD that we shouldn't just throw them into the fucking deep end like a bunch of piranhas. And you know, and then people got smart. They started having on ramps. They started actually treating it like a business, not just like a fucking in the whole wall fight club, which is pretty much what we got indoctrinated into when we showed up. I remember the first day I showed up for CrossFit, it was Fight Gone Bad. And I was like, why is it called Fight Gone Bad? And about X amount of later, I knew exactly why it was called Fight Gone Bad. Oh, it was fucking terrible.
Yeah, I showed up for the Filthy 50 my first day, and I think day 2 was Fran. So, I mean, completely obliterated.
Who's writing this shit?
I did CrossFit.
That's why I had a job.
Well, so when I did when I went to go train at that gym and I got sucked into doing CrossFit, I told my brother. My brother played college football, college baseball, super fit, strong, trained. And I was like, hey, man, you got to come do this thing with me. And he's like, fuck it. Same attitude I have. Let's go do it. So we're going through the workout. And I think there was like, it was like 3 rounds of like 3 or 4 things for 60 seconds. And like, we really were still probably doing Fight Gone Bad, just different variations. So we didn't know anything else. And so there was a rest in between rounds. And I'm like, we did 3 or Fight Gone Bad 3 or 5. I can't remember, but it was 3 rounds.
It's 3, but then a championship, like a real man, does 5.
Yeah.
Okay. So after round 2, we got a 60-second rest, and I'm like, we get done, I'm looking for him, and he's in the parking lot, and I'm looking at the window, like waving for him to come back in, and he's just shaking his head, like, fuck off, I'm not coming back. And I went out there and I was like, get back in here and fucking finish. And we almost got in a fight in a parking lot, and I ended up dragging him back in, finishes, and at that point he was hooked. He was like, fuck, if anything is this hard, I got to be able to get better, which is just stupid football player mentality.
Yeah.
You know, like if 10 sprints are good, I'm going to run 20. And, and we know that there's a law of diminishing returns and all the other deal. But I'm glad that we're a lot smarter and things have evolved past this fucking idea of just getting bloodied every day.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, checking out your Instagram, you have a new program for tactical athletes. So speak to us a little bit about that and the mindset. Because you as a tactical professional, you have an idea of the expectations, the execution, and the responsibilities outside. So now you're training specifically for those. So what's the mindset you're taking into this program?
Well, I think that, if you go back to the unknown and unknowable, I mean, that's definitely very much a key tenet of that. And what does that mean? Well, that means you could be sprinting 400 meters and then tackling someone and having just a vast array of physical qualities at your disposal. I think at the end of the day, with any program I write, it comes down to, as Louis said, the base of fitness, which for me is the aerobic system. So, writing a program like this for the masses is tricky, right? Because I would say if I'm working with someone one-on-one and they're a tactical athlete, there's a lot of other factors that come into play, like their stress levels and their, things like their resting heart rate and looking at how they are dealing with different stressors in their life at any point in time. So, boiling it down to what does a tactical athlete need that may be different than just the everyday athlete? And we know that the aerobic system is going to afford you the ability to recover. It's going to improve recovery through a number of physiological processes. It's going to allow you to tolerate stress. But how does someone transition between that and maximal strength and anaerobic power or capacity? So having a really well-designed template for this, using the conjugate system, where again we're working on multiple levels of strength, whether it be explosive strength or speed strength, or you're even going on the other end of the force velocity curve and looking at more of just maximal effort or sub-maximal effort strength. Being able to use all of those qualities of fitness at any moment's time. And again, I think that if the foundation is there, then we can do that, because anaerobic power or capacity is going to be best utilized if you have the underlying mechanisms to regenerate ATP and higher energy phosphates and have someone in a position where they can utilize the fitness that they've been working on. So if you don't have that key tenet, there's going to be a disconnect. Again, it's like having the woman at the CrossFit gym doing snatches and kipping pull-ups when she probably just needs to learn the 6 foundational movement patterns first. So that is a very, very I would say probably arguably the most important aspect of this program is having just a very consistent delivery of GPP and getting people in a position where they can utilize the fitness that they've built. But I think that at the forefront of any training program, any great training program, is the management of stress. And again, I think if you're looking at the aerobic system or someone's aerobic capacity, so to speak, then that allows us to really build in other higher demand things like anaerobic work and have it play out the way that we would like it to play out. But without that piece, I tell people with this program, and I haven't even launched it yet, but it's coming out, is that this is a very advanced program. Do I think anyone should be doing anaerobic work? Like if I'm going to ask someone to do, again, that same woman that's at the CrossFit gym, we're going to have you do, ATP PC power work on the air bike. Is that really something that's going to be an influential part of your program? Probably not. I mean, it's very dictated by a lot of things, your training age and your overall strength levels and things that will really kind of dictate whether or not that method goes the way we'd like it to. So again, I think at the end of the day, managing stress, building that base of fitness as the foundation, and then that kind of opens up the door for other things. And I think the same thing in the CrossFit gym holds true as well. If the crux of your program is building someone's base of fitness, their general physical preparedness, and then you want to do a hero workout, then I think those things will go a lot better. I think if you just skip that step and on day one you're doing filthy 50, then there's going to be an issue. Maybe not right away, but it's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Sure.
Yeah, we spoke to Annette Zapp, Fire Rescue Wellness, and she had an excellent observation because we provide a lot of training for tactical athletes, fire, police, military out there. And her biggest concern is getting firefighters to just reach that base level of fitness to then do the kick-ass programs that we all offer here, like Hammer. So it is an interesting battle. So like where you said, hey, this is not an easy program.
Yeah.
There is an on-ramp, certainly. The old get ready to get in shape.
Well, like the other one is, especially people come from the tactical world, they, there's this idea on like a fitness tests. And I'm like, the fitness, like the fact that you guys want to train just specific for a fitness test has always kind of bothered me. I always thought that, you should train your ass off and then the fitness test should just be, another training day. And, the fact that when you're all of a sudden you're scaling your entire life to somehow make some form of fitness test, that to me feels real broken. And because then people just train to, whatever the minimum standard is instead of training for like the worst possible outcome. And I think that was an interesting thing when we went and worked with the military and also anybody in the LEO law enforcement door kicker deal is like, I realize that there's fitness tests and I know that's what you're worried about, but that's not what I'm worried about. Like, are you strong enough to be able to get out of a situation with your buddies and survive? And to me, that's a better marker than some arbitrary fucking dude holding a stopwatch.
Well, I don't think it's realistic. I mean, and that's why, I should have led with that. This is a concurrent program. It's not, we're not working on maximal strength for 8 weeks or power development for 6 weeks or whatever the case may be. We're working on 365 days a year, 7 days a week. You're going to be ready to go. And again, if you just focus on aerobic development for 8 weeks, you're going to lose maximal strength. I mean, it's that vicious cycle of, as Louis used to say, going 3/4 of the way up the mountain and coming back down. So this is not a linear program. I think that you got to have that stuff. Again, people used to ask me all the time about at CrossFit gyms, what are we doing to prepare for the Open? Like the Open is one event. It happens once a year. And it used to be, I don't even know when it is now, but it was in February, the last time I checked. And, people wanted this lead up to it. And I'm just like, the work is being done year round. In a group setting, you have people that are coming in all the time. So if you run a strength cycle, you might have half the people that miss it, or someone goes on vacation for 2 weeks, they miss the crux of that cycle. So it's about being prepared 365 days a year.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've always been a fan of concurrent training models. My entire life. I always hated the classic NSAM, hey, you're going to build an aerobic and then you're going to do this and this. And I always felt that like there was a way to do a concurrent training model and even in little microcycles. And that's the way I've always designed stuff where it's like, like adjusting that EQ. I'm not just basically just playing the music, turning up the bass as loud and then just fucking tuning the bass. We're trying to make everything work. But unfortunately, and like not everybody's at the same level. And like you said, I mean, for us, we have beginner programs, and I think that there's a negative connotation with beginner. And it was, I'll just give you an analogy. Last night at, because I'm obviously a white belt, one of the other dudes who got fucking smashed was he's like, fuck, dude. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? That belt gives you the license to get fucking smashed and not be upset about it. When all of a sudden you start getting color around your waist, now people are going to fucking expect something from you. So and the guy was like, that's a really good mindset. I'm like, yeah, dude, you're supposed to get fucking smashed. What, do you think you were just going to show up and be good? And and that's similar with our programs, where people come in and they look at like the shiny, hey, look at this deal. We're going to be doing, rotating through all these different movements and this and like conjugate or whatever and sprint and run and this. And I'm like, yeah, but if you can't squat a bar well, and we can't even start with like, I always like the back squat more for reduction of force and actually teaching athletic position, challenging posture and position in these different ranges of motion, and realizing that, you were talking about squat depth, your body won't let you go into a position that's unstable. So when all of a sudden people are stopping, and in the CrossFit stuff, they're like, you got to get lower. And I'm like, maybe they're not strong enough or stable enough to get lower. I've seen plenty of people air squat fine. You put a bar on their back and they can't squat below parallel. And then they start wondering why. And I'm like, it's because you're not strong in that position. But we're going to spend a lot of time getting you strong in that position. You'll be fine. Just fucking follow the process. And there's this negative connotation with being a white belt or a beginner. And I'm like, everybody has to go through this. And if you didn't do the foundational work today, you're going to have to do it in the future. Like there's no way to skip this initial step. I don't know how to basically plug you into the matrix and make you fucking Neo, where he's like, I know jujitsu, I know Kung Fu. It doesn't fucking work like that. And that's where I think, especially with our programming stuff, being able to like help people get to the right place, because I found the sooner we can get them in the right bucket, then the better they'll do in terms of stickiness and staying with the program and evolving. When they get in the wrong bucket, they fucking peel out really fast, because they get in and some of the shit's kind of advanced and it's over their head, and you're like, man, but that's, and then when you ask them, be like, hey man, maybe it's just a little advanced. Maybe if we go back, they take offense to it. And I tell people, I'm like, dude, everybody's a beginner, and there's no shame in that. I wish I could go back in time and be a beginner, because those are the greatest strength games I ever made.
Yeah, I got a question on the line about our training program, Field Strong. Somebody asked us, is this a hard program? And I need more context from them as to what exactly they were training and looking for, because Field Strong's our athlete development programming. So it is challenging in respect, but if you're looking for the face-melting emotional intensity versus the movement challenges, French contrast, PAP, and things like that, then this is not the program for you. So needed to establish an expectation for them to walk into before me just saying, yeah, it's hard, but it's not exactly the barn burning old CrossFit style. Jason, I do have one final question for you, and this is something that we continue to battle ourselves. You had a post on the value of recovery. So active recovery versus passive recovery. A number of our training programs, we program into reload, deload weeks, because we run certain cycles on there, and people follow for a number of months, years, long time. So we have to build this in for them. But sometimes new people to this style of periodized, scheduled out training programs, they hate the deloads, they hate the reloads. So how do you argue and present and prepare your athletes for this active recovery, this week that they need their adaptations to unfold within their body and performance?
Yeah, that's always a tricky one. I think the psychology piece is something that is a part of programming education. How do you get buy-in? How do you build value in those things? And I've always been a big believer, like I mentioned early on in this episode, talking about educating the people I work with about things like the aerobic system, and what does it mean to have a better aerobic system in terms of improving nutrient delivery and more oxygen to skeletal muscle. So I try to build value through, again, very, I would say, simplistic education. I'm not going down like PhD level dissertation on the aerobic system, but just enough to get people to see that it has some value. And then, programming that in a way that it is very, it is very succinct in terms of what I'm asking them to do. So if it's zone 2, I want your heart rate to be in 60-70% range, using a cyclical measure for, in this case, I think it was 20 to 30 minutes. And just, again, building value in that. We do some type of active recovery every week. That's every Sunday in our program. And there are certain people that need more of it. There are certain people that need less of it. I have a guy right now I work with that's got a resting heart rate of 38. He wants to get stronger and gain muscle. Does he need more aerobic capacity? Absolutely not. If he goes up 5 beats per minute in his resting heart rate, he's still going to be okay. I mean, he's still in the 40s. So I think that I always, try to give that caveat of, hey man, if you're stressed out, and everything has just been the shit in your life, maybe you need to reset, where we do an actual full deload week with the Train Heroic app, because I'm sure you guys know this, that it's ongoing. And you have people that are coming on all the time. I don't necessarily do a deload week, but I used to work with a group of guys, and we would do a full deload week, where it's like a reset, where we're repatterning, we're focusing on our quality, we're just kind of getting into a headspace to jump onto something new, right? So I think that the piece of building value as to why, how it's beneficial, how, everyone always asks, this is one of the reasons I don't write articles for T Nation anymore, is because it's very hard to know what's in it for me. That's the piece of the puzzle that people want. What's in it for me? So you almost have to remove all the nuance and just say, well, listen, you are going to get stronger and more fit if you do this, and to just trust the process. So I think that going at it from that level of just the psychological value of, hey, you're not going to lose. No one got strong or weak in 1 week. No one got fat by eating one Big Mac, right? It's 1 week of time where you're de-stressing. You're going to notice a tremendous benefit when you come back. You're going to feel restored and renewed, where you have a new level of motivation to start.
I did see this caveat. I did see a teammate get out of shape in 1 week. So we finished. We did our winter conditioning. We did our spring ball, and then we had spring break.
This is college?
In college.
Okay.
And
he must have really went hard.
He went to Mexico with on this party thing. They drank we got done. Our spring game was on a Saturday, and then we had the whole week off and had to be back for summer or for whatever it was. And he goes away, and they went to some shitty thing in Mexico, spring break, where everybody gets on a bus and fucking 50 kids in a room. And I guess they drank nothing but cheap tequila and booze, and ate fucking Del Taco or something for a week.
God.
And he came back, and it was as if he had sacked away 30% of his strength. I was because I always figured you know what, you can't get out of shape in a week. I physically saw it, and he gained probably 10 pounds, looked like shit. And it took him probably better part of 2 or 3 months to play back into it. And I was like, how much did you fucking drink? So then after viewing that, I never went on spring break. So after it got done, because we knew it was starting, we didn't go on spring break. All these people were going away. We're like, nah, we're just going to hang out here. And it was always because of this one dude completely fucked himself. So I'm agree with you on that, on the one Big Mac, but 7 days of drinking, boozing, and completely fucking tearing it up, you can fucking do a lot of damage.
Well, I would agree, because I think that, as I've gotten older, I've seen that 2 days of poor eating on the weekend will I'll slowly get worse, right? Even if I'm dialed in Monday through Friday, nutrition, sleep, my training, 2 days of poor eating has the power to just completely reverse all of that hard work. I have seen that, because I think as I've gotten, closer to 40 years old, I'm I really got to be more conscious of my nutrition, and even, tracking more on the weekend than I have been in the past. And, in the past, in my 20s, it was the weekend was, I would eat perfect Monday through Friday, and the weekend would be just kind of a free for all. And it didn't really have a massive impact on me back then, but now, shit, 2 days, man, it's I actually can't believe it. It's kind of upsetting.
I'm fucking with you, dude. We did a little bit of challenge, and we were doing this just a team challenge, just to have a little bit of fun. Tex actually did great and crushed it. I did all right, and then all of a sudden I was I took some time off, and I stepped on the scale the other day, and it put on 12 pounds. And I was like, what the fuck? And it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't eating anymore, but I wasn't regularly eating. I probably was overeating a little much. I wasn't doing as much aerobic work, just wasn't like doing all of the stupid little shit. And even just like flipping it over for like a week and a half, all of a sudden I'm down, like I lost almost all of that. And I'm like, maybe there's just a little bit of fluff. Maybe as you age, and I remember like the training effect, like when I was young, let's say you miss 3 days on lifting weights or a week, or you come back to something like a few weeks later. Because we did a little bit of version of a conjugate. When I was trying to bench 500 in college, I actually called Louis on the phone because I had his numbers on the back of that Westside video. And I was like, hey, Doris answered, hello. And Louis came to the phone. And he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, hey, play football at Cal. I'm trying to bench 500. And he laid me out a program over the phone. He's like, you're going to need heavy dumbbells and this. And I want your 3 movements to be, heavy flat bench, dumbbells, heavy floor press, and then a ton of close grips. And we're going to do pauses. And he fucking gave me this program. And ended up benching 500.
Do you still have that program?
Yeah. I don't physically have it written down, but I remember how the cycle went.
Oh, yeah.
And his thing, there was no accommodating resistance, but the old power lifter I trained with in high school, he was a buddy of Fred Hatfield. And so when I was 14, we talked about compensatory acceleration, and it was always like, you're going to lift weights like old people. Like, don't lift weights like old people have sex, he used to say, slow and careful. Try to break those motherfuckers. And we talked about compensatory acceleration. So then when I talked to Lou, he was like, not necessarily accommodating resistance, but I had mentioned Old Man Zangus and compensatory acceleration. And he knew George because they were, power lifters, federations, the whole deal. And but he wrote that program out, and I ended up benching 500. And it worked extremely well. But there were things that we wouldn't touch, like at that age. All of a sudden we didn't touch something for 3 weeks and came back and I was just as strong. Now I find if I don't like revisit things more frequently, all of a sudden I don't have the same type of shit. Or if I all of a sudden I miss a meal or something, all of a sudden I feel the effect a lot more, which I think is the value of aging. I think you just have less, or you need greater, or I'm sorry, it's a tighter bullseye. Like there's less margin of error the older you get. Whereas I felt like when I was young, I could just fucking spray and pray, type of a deal.
I agree. I think now too, I've seen that I almost crave less variation in my own programming. Doing the same variations for not longer than 4 weeks, but at least 3 or 4 weeks, which usually goes right hand in hand with like if I'm running a dynamic effort wave. But having, and that's been a challenging one for a lot of the ex-CrossFit people because they're used to doing different workouts every single day. There's no repetition. You do a close grip bench press on week 1, and week 2 it might be a jerk variation. So it's all over the place. So having them perform the same patterns for 3 weeks at a given time, and building, really focusing on building good motor patterns and maybe increasing the intensity over that course of that 3 weeks has been very, very helpful for a lot of these people to get better. And sometimes they get better without even any progression. Sometimes they get better just by improved range of motion from week 1 to week 3.
Or trying to explain to them that strength isn't random, that nobody just randomly got strong. Like that was
it's called a black box, John.
No, it's not. Fucking strength is something that you repeatedly put effort into. And there, it's Milo's bowl. There's a million different ways to kind of, if you want to get into a West Side conjugate in this, but at the end of the day, like there's never a day where it wasn't heavy. You weren't trying to move as fast as you can, or you weren't doing some rep work on the bodybuilding side. And the interesting thing with the conjugate is I think people get so emotionally attached to the different movements. And I remember Louis was like, I could do a conjugate anywhere. You could put me in nature and we could fucking figure out conjugate, with the idea that we got to find something slightly heavier than you could lift for X amount of reps. We need to be able to find something kind of light. We could pick up rocks and throw them. And I remember when I went out there, I think I had like 17 meals in a row with Lou. We would like go to breakfast, lunch, and dinner for, it's pretty amazing. God rest his soul now that he's passed. All we have is the videos and all the stuff Tom's collected. But, I like in hindsight, I wish I had somebody with a camera videoing those fucking dinners that we went to, where he's sitting there drawing shit out on mats and talking about this and just pontificating. And when he talked about like people get so emotionally attached to the movements. It's not the movements. It's your ability to move something slightly heavier than you can. Can you do something dynamic? And then are you doing enough work to be able to get enough volume to drive it? And I think that was extremely impactful for me. And I'm forever grateful for the interactions I had with him, because he's a fucking trendsetter, man. He was a cool cat.
Without a doubt. I mean, I don't think, the success of my initial business writing programming for CrossFit gyms, I don't think that, I think at the end of the day, results are king, right? So if you're getting people results, whether or not you're doing any marketing or you have good social media posts, like, results speak for themselves. And I do believe that the results did come from my, background with the Conjugate method and what I learned from going through Louis' books. And so I don't think I would be sitting here if I didn't have that experience with Westside and Louis Simmons and just all the things I learned from him over the years.
Cool.
Sweet. Jason, if people want to learn more, where should they head to, whether it's education or programming?
They can go to my Instagram page, Jason Brown Coaching, jasonbrowncoaching.com. And yeah, there's lots of free stuff. So as we talked about, lots of stuff you can dig into, lots of articles. So if you're interested in any one of those things, strength, conditioning, the marriage of the two, that stuff is all there ready to go for you. So dig in and enjoy.
Sweet.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming on Power Athlete Radio. Bye.
Yeah, it's great being on. I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.